Where's my other leg?
It's attached to you.
All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm just gonna give you an introduction to my 1990 Mazda Miata. So going back pretty far here, I was in college and didn't really care about cars yet. I was kind of getting involved in like the SAE club and kind of getting excited about motors, motor vehicles, a little more than just, getting from A to B. But it wasn't until I got out of college and started making a little more money, I had a job and everything, so I knew I could get a second car if I really wanted, but honestly, I couldn't pull myself to pull the trigger on anything. I'm pretty frugal. But turns out my uncle was trying to sell his Miata, and for some reason decided to reach out to me, and he was going to give me a pretty sweet deal on it. So I picked it up for $1,500 from him, and then shipped it out across the country out here. And the condition was pretty mint. So it has 114,000 miles on it. It was, like I said, in 1990. He bought it fresh off the boat in 1989 and has had it ever since. So it's been a family car for ever since he bought it back then. And he took great care of it, except I think a tree fell on it twice, so that was kind of an issue. But nothing you can't fix with a new soft top. He did have a hard top with it, so I got that. It had the upgrade package, so viscous limited slip differential in the rear, headrest speakers, so that when the top's down you can still hear your music. So I thought it would be just a fun car to kind of learn on. I didn't actually know how to drive a manual until I bought the thing, and so that was kind of a process. And turns out my cousin learned on it. I taught my brother how to drive on it, so it's kind of a family heirloom at this point, it feels like. So I was just kind of having fun driving it around, and then I had to replace the catalytic converter to pass emissions, and that's where everything kind of went downhill or uphill. I don't know what to say there, but took that piece off, and then I decided, I don't like how this is looking on the car, so I'll replace that, and then I'll replace that and replace that, and it just kept going and going as things do. And eventually got to the point where we wanted to do a big turbo build on it, and since it's the B6ZE engine, so that's the 1.6 liter that came in the Miatas from 90 to 94, 95, something like that. Had about 116 horsepower from the factory, and my uncle actually put a Eaton M45 supercharger on it, I don't know, in the 90s. It's been on there for a while, and it gave a little oomph to the car, made it a lot more fun to drive, real peppy, added 30, 40 horsepower, something like that. But it worked with the stock ECU, and the fuel system just needed a regulator. So it was pretty simple bolt-on, but didn't add a ton of power, and you always want more when you've got a fun car like that. So since it's got the short nose crank version, if you don't know what that is, it's only on 1 to 2 years of those 1.6 liters in the Miata, and it's a shorter crank bolt. They under-designed the crank bolt basically in those engines, and it can lead to failures. And I didn't really want to deal with that if I was going to go high horsepower, so I was going to rip the whole motor out and then put a 1.8 liter in and try to build that up. Kind of like you see several people do, like Greg Peters on the Car Passion channel. He's kind of a Miata daddy to me. At that, by the time I gotten the engine out and was kind of looking around for motors to do that swap with, I ended up getting the 260Z, and so I didn't want to pour money into the Miata that I needed to put into the Z. I'm not that rich, and so I decided instead to rebuild the 1.6, meaning do all new seals, replace the short crank bolt with a new one, new crank gear, new seals on the cams, gears, and then replace the seals on the transmission, and really tidy it up, make it look nice, and make it kind of a fun little daily driver. So like I said, I didn't really know too much about cars. I wasn't that into cars until I started working on this Miata and really got into it, and really discovered why so many people seem to want to get Miatas now. They're cheap. I mean, I got a fantastic deal. Now you can't really find a deal like that unless you know someone. But you know, they're great for autocross. People like to drift them here and there, and they just handle amazing even on the stock suspension I had in there. I've since switched that out, but even on the 30-year-old suspension, it felt really tight. And they're so light with minimal horsepower, you can still have a blast in them. So, you know, they have a saying that Miata stands for Miata is always the answer. It's because it's just a great car to learn on, to compete on, and to build on. And they're still real cheap to maintain and upgrade. So that's why so many people love them. That's why I love it. I can't really convince myself to get rid of it. Yeah, there's just a plethora of swaps out there, tons of forum communities working on these things, and you know, swapping K-Series Hondas, LSs. I've even seen a V12. You know, there's tons of different options to go with these little cars. You know, I was saying that the car is in mint condition. There's a few issues with it. The paint's not perfect. I think it was repainted in a couple parts and wasn't done right, so the paint's been kind of chipping off in places, kind of in little dime size splotches, and there's some orange peel from the factory. I think my aunt ran into something in the garage at one point, I don't know, like 20 years ago. So since I decided to put the original 1.6 with some refreshments back in, I thought it would be, you know, great to put the old supercharger back on with some upgraded pieces, like new vacuum components and that should be replaced anyways on those systems, a new pulleys for the supercharger belt route. And I noticed that there's a kind of a grinding noise, which usually indicates that the supercharger needs a snout rebuild, which is new coupler, bearings, and everything in the snout portion of the supercharger. And noticed a little bit of play, not much, in the rotors, since it's a root style, and that usually indicates that the needle bearings should be replaced, which are in the back of the supercharger housing behind the rotors. Luckily, it's an open face on the back, so they're easy to press out and press back in, except I kind of cocked one of the bearings pressing it back in when I was trying to do that rebuild, which marred the aluminum housing. So I had to get that remachined, or basically machined out, have a sleeve pressed into it, and then press the bearing into that sleeve. That process has taken a while. A friend's just helped me out, and so I decided, you know, for the time being, run it NA, get a feel for the car with that, and make sure that all the refreshments I put on the engine are working, no leaks. And then from there, once the supercharger is rebuilt, I'll put that back on it and have a fun daily driver again. So like I said, the car had been hit by a couple trees, and that meant that the soft top had a large hole in it. I patched it up with Gorilla Tape, which is good enough for a couple days. It kept out the water, but I never really trusted it, and it looked kind of crummy. So I decided, since I'm usually running the hard top, I'll just get a really cheap extreme top and put that on for just in case you don't have the top down and want to put the top up. So no glass window, it's just the plastic window, and then kind of the cheap vinyl material, no canvas or anything. and put that on the car. It looks good, it works, and it's cheap. So in taking the engine out and the transmission off, that process led me to the discovery that my clutch was pretty much gone. It didn't feel bad, but there's almost no material on it. So one thing these engines like to do is generate a ton of heat, and that all collects in the engine bay. And I really felt it, especially with the supercharger when I had that in there. And when I put the new header on, we decided to wrap it with an titanium exhaust wrap to keep the heat down in the engine bay. And that's, if I ever decide to put the supercharger back on, that's really going to help because it's a hot side supercharger. Having that supercharger on top of the exhaust manifold is not ideal. So trying to keep that heat away from the supercharger and down out through the exhaust is preferred and will lead to increased performance and longer life of all those components. So stay tuned for more Miata content. I'm excited to just keep working on this car, doing little mods here and there, little performance upgrades, keeping it nice, and maybe taking it out for autocross day or something to that nature. Softbot?
Softbot.
A little robot?
Wow.
A little robot on the car?
Soft right now,
How soft are you, Joe?
on a scale of 1 to soft. Right, so check out this new soft.
So check out the bots. They're turning bots into bombs.
Check out how we installed this new soft.
So check out how we installed this new soft top. Joe, you messed me up.
You were still talking.
You were laughing. Shh. So check out how we installed this new soft top. So check out how we installed this new engine. So check out how we installed.